My birth name is Lynn Margaret Mollett. In Camden, New Jersey. I lived in Manny until I was in 3rd grade, and then we moved to Greenfield Heights here, near Woodbury. 1971. I met John in Gloucester County College, so I was 17 or 18 when we met. Well, he would argue with this, but it was probably 6 years before we were married. Got married in 1979. We both wanted to have a family. I always thought I would have 2 boys and 2 girls. We didn't want to have children right away, but then I started talking to your father and said, maybe we should start trying, because I was going to be 30. So, and I know sometimes it's not easy to have a child right away. So we were married almost 4 years when Jonathan was born. Jonathan was indeed my first pregnancy. That was an ideal pregnancy. It was fun, and I enjoyed being pregnant, and everything went well. He was 10 days late. He cried a lot. He cried every evening for 3 months. I got pregnant probably when he was around 3, but I had a miscarriage. It was early in the first trimester. It was disappointing, but you know, those things happen. We waited a few months, and then we tried again. And then I got pregnant again. That was a full-term pregnancy. I carried full term with Emily, and I went for a regular checkup towards the end of my pregnancy, and the doctor said they didn't hear a heartbeat. So he sent me to the hospital, where they determined that the baby was not alive. The doctor, quite honestly, was kind of a jerk, because he just told me to go right to the hospital, and I was at the doctor's by myself. So at that point, he didn't tell me that the baby was dead, but I knew something was terribly wrong, so I came home and got your father. And he was very upset and driving very quickly to get to the hospital, and I was trying to get him to slow down. And at that point, I kind of knew that the baby was probably dead. And you really don't know what to hope for. You don't know whether you should pray that the baby is alive, knowing that it's probably going to be brain damaged, or, you know, something wrong with it, or, I mean, of course you pray that the baby's going to be fine, but in my gut I knew something was wrong, because I hadn't felt the baby move in a day or so. So they took me into the hospital. The nurses and the doctor there were very, very compassionate and very nice.
What hospital is this?
Underwood. And you still have to deliver the baby, even though it's not living. I got to the hospital, they did an ultrasound, and they, tried to find the heartbeat, and they couldn't find a heartbeat. So at that point, they determined that the baby was not alive. We were both very, very upset. And, you've waited 9 months expecting to have a baby. Jonathan was such a good pregnancy and a healthy baby that you don't really expect. Everybody says the first trimester is the most dangerous, but I have since learned that until you're holding that baby in your arms, you're never safe during your pregnancy. A lot of things could go wrong. We take it for granted that everything's going to be fine. And so they had to induce me so that I would go into labor. I had to deliver the baby. Well, they give you Pitocin, which is a medicine to, start the contractions going, and your body will naturally expel the baby. But it's just like giving birth to a baby that's alive. So you go through the long labor. What I did get with Jonathan, I had natural delivery and didn't have any drugs. But with this baby, they gave me a spinal so that they could, cut the pain. You're kind of really in a daze. I mean, it just happened so fast, and you're really just trying to get through it. I mean, after we had the baby, and they said it was a girl, and I was very, very, that made it even worse because your father really, really wanted a little girl. And that made it, I think, even harder. After I delivered, they take the baby. We didn't see the baby, and we were in the recovery room, and then somebody came in and said, "Can you give us the name of your funeral director?" And we were like, "I don't have a funeral director." We weren't expecting to need a funeral director, so they recommended some people, and they asked us what her name was going to be, and all along we had said it would be Emily. But then I said to Daddy that then maybe we shouldn't name her Emily because we might want to use that later. And he said no, Emily was her name. So that's her name. So then they asked us if we wanted to see her. I was scared because I didn't know what to expect. And the nurse, I asked her, and the nurse was very sweet. She said, "She looks like a little baby." They determined that the cord was wrapped around her neck, and there had been a kink in the cord, and that's what made her die. And later the doctor told me that he's delivered babies that have 3 knots in a cord and still are fine. It just takes one split second where that cord kinks tight enough to block off the oxygen, and that's all it takes. I mean, Jonathan had the cord around him too, but he was fine. So they asked us if we wanted to have an autopsy, and I asked the doctor, "Well, are you sure it was the cord?" And he said, "Yes, I'm sure it's the cord." So we didn't want to have an autopsy. They brought her in to us, and they let us hold her, and they left us alone with her for a few minutes so that we could, have some privacy. And we cried. We held her. And then they took her away. It was very, very difficult. It was probably the worst day of my life. And I told them I didn't want to stay in the hospital. I wanted to go home to Jonathan because I didn't want to be on the maternity ward with the babies. So they said that was fine if they just watched me for a while, kept me there. And then Daddy had to call everybody, the immediate family, and tell them the news, and it was very, very hard. Actually, Bocce, Daddy's mother, came to the hospital with Aunt Diane before I delivered, but we didn't want to see anybody, so we made them go home. I don't think Bocce or Nanny really understood what was going on. They had said later, well, why couldn't they save her? They really didn't understand that she was dead before we even got